Okay, be right back. I always cut you off. I've been doing that a lot lately.
I don't have anything good to say.
It made me laugh when it happened during the Saw one last night. I was cracking up. I was like, you were like, "Oh, it's not as bad as then it was." You gradually got quieter.
Like, oh, all right.
Sorry, it's
That's
not on
right.
purpose.
Government is comparing Y2K.
We expected it to be very different, but they weren't at all. Yeah.
The curse would be laid upon them.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Voices from the Mausoleum, and welcome to another episode of Two Friends and a Conspiracy Theory with my co-host, Radar.
Howdy, y'all.
We got merch.
And we got merch. Check it out. We're wearing our shirts. Second episode in a row. That's a streak.
It has nothing to do with the fact that we record them in bulk. Radar's more committed to the illusion than I am. He's like, let me go change my shirt. I'll be right back.
I've done that at least a few times, but
Perhaps. But yeah, our shirts, there's a link to merch if you really like our logo, if you're really digging the show, if you just want to help support the channel. The link for the merch is in the description for this episode. This is limited logo merch. We will not have this once Conspiracy Theories has come to an unfortunate end when we wrap up our show. So this is only available until the show is finished. And then you will no longer be able to get anything with Two Friends and a Conspiracy. So highly recommend checking it out. There's other stuff too. If you don't want to pay for a shirt, there's also stickers and stuff like that. So give it a gander.
the design is really cool, y'all. I say it's worth it.
I think so too. I'm really proud with the way that it printed on the shirts. It's always a little bit of a nail biter when you get a new design for the first time on shirts. You're just like, please don't look like shit. Please don't look like shit. Yeah. So last week we talked a very depressing tale about the Lemmings and the connection to Walt Disney. And so this week Radar is taking it away with another conspiracy theory.
Indeed. And of course, as per usual, Angel doesn't know what conspiracy I'm going to be talking about, but I'm going to keep it simple today. I'm going to be talking about the lizard men and how they control every single aspect of the government. Oh, no, wait, sorry. That's my notes must get mixed up. I'm actually just talking about Mount Rushmore.
Classic misdirection.
Got him on
your. You know what's funny? The last time you did one, you were like, "Yeah, I did it in the first one too," and I'd forgotten which one you did. It was the cup or something last time. So when I went back and watched it after the episode went live, I was like,
"Gotcha." Now you're on your A game. Now you're.
I'm waiting on.
Dang it.
And I could have bought the lizard man thing, except for the fact that I've already seen the list. I just don't know what order you're going in. And that was not on the list. So
shoot. I've been found out. I'm gonna have to come up with new conspiracy theories now.
Yeah. And just like really throw me off. I'll be like, wait a second. We're checking my notes.
What's going on? But so as per usual, with what seemed to happen with JFK and Y2K. This is a conspiracy theory talking about the hidden chamber in Mount Rushmore, but more than anything, it's just a facade so I can give everyone a history lesson because the history behind Mount Rushmore and the person who made it is fascinating in its own light because it's kind of funny.
I don't know anything about it, I don't think.
Most people don't. But so basically, Mount Rushmore lives in South Dakota. Many of people have traveled to see it. Mm-hmm. Lives on land that was illegally seized from the Lakota. So it's still a bit of a sore subject matter for obvious reasons. But there is this big conspiracy. There's kind of two going on here, but it's that they're inside of Mount Rushmore is a huge, giant chamber. And in that chamber it's just filled with all these important government documents and secrets. So stuff on like the real moon landing or, aliens, right. all of the conspiracy theories involving the government are supposedly stored in this vault. That's the theory. This vault that's hidden inside of Mount Rushmore.
That's intense.
Yeah. And then the other theory, which has gained traction because of my good friend Nicolas Cage and National Treasure 2, is that there's a huge catacomb inside Mount Rushmore that hides treasure of some sort.
Oh no.
And so people think that there's some big treasure hidden somewhere in Mount Rushmore. And they're like, ooh, buddy, if we could just climb up there and get inside, we can shimmy on down. Or people are like, if they just let us up in there, we'll be able to find, all these documents, all these government secrets will be revealed. And as per usual with conspiracy theories, there is actually a bit of truth to it, because there is a room in Mount Rushmore.
Interesting.
Yeah, so there is a room, but it was originally supposed to be, and I'll get into it a little bit later, it was supposed to be much bigger than it ended up being, but it does exist, and it was meant to be a hall of records, and the idea was that it was going to store like the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence inside of it. Would the federal government have gone for it? Probably not. But the person who designed and helped sculpt Mount Rushmore really thought that, he's like, artistically, this needs to happen. This is my vision. And so that leads us into who the heck made Mount Rushmore. And that is credited to a sculptor, an artist with a wild name, Gutzon Borglum. His name is Gutzon Borglum.
Is it too late for you to change your writer name?
Gutzon Borglum. It is why it does sound like something that like some writer made as like a gibberish character in like a sci-fi.
Something. Yeah, something.
But the man who built Mount Rushmore is literally named Gutzon Borglum.
That's crazy. Yeah.
And he was the son of a Danish Mormon immigrant to America. So that kind of explains that wild name.
Sure.
And basically Gutzon went around, he did his thing, and I'll talk about him a little bit more, but I wanted to give some facts about Mount Rushmore and how it came to be.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's kind of the credit as like the grandfather of Mount Rushmore itself actually belongs to Diona Robinson.
Mm-hmm.
This is pretty funny with Robinson. And he was a historian for South Dakota.
Okay.
And his idea, he was like, for Mount Rushmore, was he's like, I wanted to have sort of Western heroes.
Yeah.
And so he's like Lewis and Clark, Sacagawea, Lakota Chief Red Cloud, Buffalo Bill Cody, Lakota Chief Crazy Horse, which Crazy Horse is actually getting his own monument. It's still in the works. It's been going on for years.
Oh, that's
cool. So he like did a combination of like just Western frontiersmen and actual Lakota like heroes.
Yeah.
And
that
so,
would have been way cooler. Anyway.
Yeah. So in 1923/1924, he's like, I need someone to go and do this. And so he reached out to Gutzon Borglum. and Borglum came in and went, that's a nice idea, but I'm just going to slap 4 white presidents on there instead. So because Borglum was like, that's cool. And his thinking was these are regional heroes. And he wanted to be like a national thing, like really to have everyone in the country come and see it. So he's like, the presidents are the representation of the nation. And of course, he selected Washington, Jefferson, Lincoln,
Lincoln.
Roosevelt.
Yeah.
He really, really liked Roosevelt for some reason, but he he did. So 1924, he found Burglum found Mount Rushmore, and he was like, "This is going to be the site." They put together like funds and everything, and then 3 years later, in 1927, they actually started work on Mount Rushmore. It took. Take a guess at how long it took to build Mount Rushmore.
I'm gonna say
Okay.
10 years.
Fairly close. 14 years.
I almost said 15. I came really close to saying 15. I was like, that feels excessive.
And the project outlasted Borglum by 2 years because he died in 1939. Yeah, he died in 1939. It was finished in 1941.
Oh my gosh.
And it cost just under $1 million to do, which would be roughly $17 million in today's money. Yeah, so not like not crazy.
I don't feel like that. I wouldn't have guessed that little, honestly. I would have said, even for the time. I mean, obviously, considering less was more then. I still would have thought it was way more than that.
Yeah, and they basically ended up taking up about 500,000 tons of rock from Mount Rushmore, getting it off of there. And so that's cool and all, but so basically the whole that's cool and all, but it's so funny because the premise was that Borglum, when he originally pitched it, the initial contract was to put the four faces on there.
Okay.
And as they continued to work on it and continued to have setback after setback, Borglum, part of it was mostly because of Borglum, because he was a dickhead. But Borglum,
I mean, it's the name, right?
The name. It's any dude
He's
named Borglum.
Angry all the time.
He's like, why can't I get a better name? But he kept trying to make updates to the design, and that is where that hidden room in Mount Rushmore came about, because he was like, what he envisioned was a 800-foot staircase leading from the front of the monument up into Mount Rushmore, and there would be a whole gilded hall filled with records, like a huge thing.
Listen, that's a lot of steps. Are you fucking kidding me? 800?
Yeah. 800 steps. Obviously didn't happen because they aren't there today.
Right.
Yeah. Duh. But they did end up carving out a room, as I said before, but it's not that big at all. And it's actually a more of a monument to Borglum, because his family put up a few things in memoriam to him. And so that's really what it's for now, is because it's not big enough to do anything else with. But the other part of this, that's something Borglum wanted to put in there. And he pitched it while they were behind schedule, while they were over budget. And the other thing he pitched was he also wanted to do the presidents all the way down to their waists. Yeah, so it took 14 years to do their heads. And he's like, we can do the waist down.
I feel like that would make them look silly, though.
Probably,
I mean, just given I think the heads are I don't know, whatever, right? At this point, they're just historical. But I feel like if you did that much, they would be silly looking.
They would be so weird because it'd be so difficult too, because the detail to carve the faces is already tough enough. But imagine trying to design the torsos in a way that looks good, and how the arm should be. That's just so much work. Too much work. Too much work.
Yeah,
And
can
like,
you imagine like if they started with the faces and then they went down after all that work and then they like messed up something on the tour? So like, well, we gotta blow up this whole thing and start over. But yeah, I feel like that would not look very serious. I think it would look very silly.
yeah. And yeah, so very, very weird, but he was really a perfectionist. And he was like, I'm going to try to get this, as my legacy, as my vision. I want all this stuff added on.
Yeah.
And he kept butting heads with people during the whole time. And there's a quote that perfectly, because he was a total dickhead. He just feuded with everyone. He called every single person on his staff an idiot. He said, no one's qualified to do anything except for my sons. What a great recipe. And just, so there was this continual stuff. And this is a beautiful quote from the former South Dakota governor, William G. Bulow. And he said, no one could get along with Mr. Borglum for any length without losing his temper, unless one was a saint. And there are very few human saints.
Fair point.
Perfect.
Oh,
and
no.
So I don't know if you remember the name of Deona Robinson.
Yeah.
Robinson, again, approached Borglum with the idea. He helped fund the campaign. He helped get it up and running. He became the manager when it got transferred to the National Park Service during this 14-year process to help get it more funding. And his job was to make sure, it was coming in roughly on time and roughly on budget.
Yeah.
And Borglum hated him.
Dang.
He hated Roland, and it's so funny because it's a one-sided beef.
Yeah, because and that's because that's just apparently like how he was. Like he just
would always talk crap about Roland. He would always try to undermine him because he thought Roland was trying to do the same thing to him, but Roland was just like
all the way, yeah.
Yeah, and Roland was one of his biggest supporters, and it's so funny and this is just Borglum's personality. And then the other person who needs to be noted is Peter Norbeck, who was a state senator from South Dakota, and he was the big guy who got funding for almost all the funding to help build Mount Rushmore, continuously doing this stuff. He had a super bad illness, and he had to have surgery and everything. And he was really out of commission for a year. Norbeck was, and he still managed to put together a fundraising event to get money for Mount Rushmore. He was really dedicated to getting it built. So he was the biggest proponent, and no one really talks about him, but I wanted to bring him in there. You can look up a pic. It's like, this dude is, turn of the century politician. And it's like, he looks, it's like, he's more of a Teddy Roosevelt knockoff than anything.
It's crazy that there were that. I obviously, like I said before, I don't know that much about Mount Rushmore, but I definitely did not have a reason, I feel, to believe there were so many people involved. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, there's so many people involved, and it took a little around 400 workers over this 14-year period to get it built.
Makes me think of Egyptian pyramids,
right?
And it's
in the vast majority of this too. Actually, almost the whole entire construction process took place during the Great Depression.
Right, because it was the 30s and the 40s or 40s.
Yeah.
30s and 40s because it was
late 20s, 30s, right at the beginning of the 40s. Yeah.
Beginning of the 40s. Yeah.
Yeah, literally.
Right. But the 30s is the mid 30s is when the Great Depression was at its worst or getting to at its worst. So yeah,
really bad. So during that whole period, so it's that's also part of why funding was difficult, because they were the government, FDR was making all these new programs, and he's like, guys, we got to make sure people can eat. And Borglum's like, but my rocks, my rocks. So, and he did not have tact, as we have.
As it, yeah, apparently not.
But there's, and if you want to learn more about like Mount Rushmore and like it kind of take a more narrative approach to how it got built and everything, there's a podcast called American History Tellers, and it's fantastic. It's hosted by Lindsey Graham, not that Lindsey Graham, different one. He also makes fun of it in most of his episodes. In the earlier stuff, he's like, "I'm not that Lindsey Graham."
That's good information to have.
Yeah. So, but it's such a good like factual, but also it injects like some narrative scenes into it.
Yeah.
And the act, like the voice work is really good in it. Definitely recommend checking that out. And there's an episode, like there was they do mini series, and one of their mini series was over American monuments, and Mount Rushmore was one of those episodes. So it dives into detail. So that's definitely worth checking out. But
If you remember, maybe after we're done recording, if you send me the link, I'll include it in the episode so people can go check it out if they're interested.
Absolutely. But now we get to the most important part, I think, that needs to be mentioned about Mr. Gutzon Borglum. So he was a hothead. He clashed with a lot of things, and he was kind of poached to do Mount Rushmore.
Oh.
In 1924, he was working on a project at the time, but he was really butting heads with the people in charge of it.
Yeah.
And that project was Stone Mountain. And for everyone who doesn't know, Stone Mountain is a nice little carving into the side of a mountain of Confederate leaders from the Civil War. And in the early days of Stone Mountain, a lot of that funding, and this is a well-known fact, came from the KKK.
Okay.
And Borglum was a bit of a racist.
Of course he was, right?
And this is so funny because he's like the parent of immigrants. He referred to them as slippered assassins. And
his parents?
Just immigrants in general.
Oh, immigrants in general.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, but his parents were immigrants, but he referred to immigrants as slippered assassins, and he said there was a great influx of them that will ruin this country. And here's another great quote from a historian.
Okay.
And it says, he never came out and said he was a member of the Klan, but he sure was at the table with them a lot. So he was openly known for going to Klan meetings. He did hang out with the Klan quite a lot until he maybe, thankfully, burned the bridge by being a dick while making Stone Mountain. And this is hilarious because he spent because of World War I and a few other things, they didn't really get into building it until the beginning of the 1920s.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that Borglum did isn't there on Stone Mountain because they had to just dynamite it off and start all over.
What?
Yeah.
Well.
So if you go to the monument,
mm-hmm.
there is no trace of Borglum on it, but he had a hand, and he ran in those circles. So keep that in mind when you're going to visit Mount Rushmore.
That kind of stuff is so common in things that are still up, as far as monuments and even in and I'm sure obviously in smaller towns and stuff, especially in the South, there's a lot of statues of people that there should not be statues of, and it played a big hand in that kind of stuff. Not just at that level too, but even at a smaller level. So that's crazy, but funny that it was no, they're just gonna erase that part of it. That's funny.
Yeah, but it's so interesting that that the vast majority of people do not remember him, and maybe that's because his name is Wild. because I have to continuously look over here to remember how to say Borglum. But it's just so interesting that he didn't, this conspiracy theory that
Mhm.
is easy to latch onto was just born out of this egotistical racist dude who created one of America's most well-known monuments.
Yeah.
But it's so interesting that the construction took so long because it went from Woodrow Wilson to FDR. So this is major parts of history here. It went through several different presidents.
No, yeah, for sure.
And it was a lot of money because and you did make the comment, 17 million, and I thought so too. 17 million doesn't seem like that much money for a federal project.
Or something like that. Right.
Yeah. But then in the midst of the Great Depression, that's a lot of money.
A waste of money, actually.
Yeah.
Money that could have been better spent on the people, but isn't that the story of U.S. history in general?
Yeah. So I know this wasn't much of a conspiracy episode, but I just think the history behind this is so interesting.
Yeah.
And the conspiracy is just right at the tail end. And if you want to go check out some of, I'll post that video, the link to the American History Tellers episode.
You can go listen.
Yeah, and it's great. If you want to check out even more, obviously go watch National Treasure 2. Clearly that if you want the true story on what's going on in Mount Rushmore.
It's cool because the government stuff can be so deep, like the rabbit holes for the conspiracy theories that are related to the government type stuff can be very deep, right? But for me, they're always the most believable.
Right.
Because I think people are okay, before the government was like, okay, fine, aliens are real, right? And no one cared because we all can't pay our bills. But it was one of those things where it was for me, they have so much more going on than they will ever tell us. And it's just so much more believable. This is the government conspiracy. Okay, I am one of those people that truly believes that the concept of a zombie not dying and coming back to life, not that kind of zombie, the virus kind of zombie, could potentially be a very real threat. And I am almost certain that whatever color vial it is that would make that happen exists. And I'm certain that it is somewhere. You know what I'm saying? And so there was this whole thing with the bath salts stuff, remember, from a couple years ago. And there was this guy in Florida, of course, and he was on bath salts and bit off somebody's face and they shot him and he didn't go down. It was this whole thing. Well, the government, the people that released the information about that story were very quick to be bath salts. But if you look up the report, he tested negative for bath salts. And I'm that's because he was a fucking zombie. The government zombie virus got out and they were oh no. Anyway, the government is Raccoon City. I'm just saying. But anyway, those are always the ones to me that feel more realistic because I just feel they're just not good people, most of them. So it's
and there's always, it's so funny with the government conspiracy ones because there's always an ounce of truth in them too,
Yes.
Especially with this one too, because yes, there is a small group.
And so you're well, it's not, it wouldn't be that far-fetched that the other also exist.
Right. That
we just don't know about it as the public because the government doesn't want us to know those things. So why would we?
But I mean, that would be it as soon as you think about it on a logistical standpoint, why the hell would they store their documents in a mountain in one of the most remote states in America? There's hardly any fast ways to get to South Dakota.
Yeah, no, it doesn't make any sense. I agree.
But it's just an interesting one because of the history behind it. Kind of like Y2K, kind of like the JFK assassination. There's real history behind it. And it doesn't get, enough light on it because people are normally just face value, no pun intended, going to look at faces on a mountain. But yeah, I think it needed to get I feel I need to give it a little more spotlight on it, on Mr.
No,
Borglum.
that's cool. I didn't know, like I had said before, I didn't know any of that. So that's crazy to learn. And it's always crazy to me when people from a specific life will then like turn their back on that life, and then like the thing about him coming from immigrant parents and then being like immigrants are a problem. It's so strange. Like, you weren't even, what are you talking about? Like, I don't, it doesn't
Like,
make sense. It's crazy.
yeah.
But no, that's really cool. I didn't know any of that. I have not seen National Treasure 2.
Well, now you have to.
Yeah.
No,
History.
you don't.
It's for a history lesson. I got to.
It's history. That's history right there.
History.
That's a documentary.
That's right. Duh.
All right. Well, that is the conspiracy of a huge vault hidden in Mount Rushmore, and more so the history of Mount Rushmore. So there you have it, y'all.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, all right. Well, that's going to wrap up this episode, I think, of two. Why is it so hard to say at the end of the episode? Two friends.
Maybe I should do it.
What's the name of the show?
Two friends and a conspiracy theory.
Yeah, so next time we will be back, and I will be doing the learned. I will be teaching Radar about a conspiracy theory. I don't think I know which one I'm going to do next. We're getting down to like my last, like my big ones. I've got two kind of big ones I'm kind of pushing to the end probably. But we're getting through our list pretty quickly, actually. So
yeah.
Yeah, if you have not, this is the first episode of Two Friends and a Conspiracy that you've seen. There's a playlist. We've covered JFK, King Tut. What was the other ones? Oh,
Y2K,
Y2K, and Lemmings, Walt Disney. And so anyway, so go check those out. Let us know in the comments conspiracy theories that you believe in or that you know about. Maybe we don't know about those. We could look into them.
right.
But yeah, I think that's all we have for this episode. As always, there is Radar's links for where you can find him, and his content and his books are in the description for this episode. Definitely, if you're not already following him, please do. And that's all we have for this episode. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. We hope you have a good rest of your week. Enjoy your weekend, and we'll see you in the next one.